here on Draft Utopia, Geckos not included, is me, Joseph Pollard, once again, joined by Chris Ransom. And this is week 0 of the college football season and the last day of the NFL preseason. So, Chris, let's show them what's on tap.
Well, today's lineup includes a brief overview of our AFC East and NFC East previews from last week that our listeners did not get to hear due to audio difficulties. I've got everything set up this time around. We'll get it right for our audience. We also have news on Austin Matthews becoming the highest paid player in the NHL. Another former number 1 pick, Steven Strasburg, announced his retirement. We've got the SEC preview. Joey and I are going to reveal our college football playoff predictions. Joey has my Buckeyes in the playoff. I don't think they're going to make the playoff, but I will hear him out when we get to that segment later in the show. We've got AFC West, NFC West predictions, and week 0 college football predictions at the very end. So on that note, I'm going to dive into the Bills really quickly here. I think they win the division, and I think they're the team to beat in the AFC. I know Mark Suva does have some concerns about their middle linebacker position with Edmonds gone. Terrell Bernard or Dorian Williams, I think whoever steps in can fill that role. And I love that the Bills added Leonard Floyd. He's going to complement Rosso and Von Miller and the Bills offense. They've got, as long as Josh Allen, Diggs, and their left tackle, Deion Dawkins, stay healthy, I think the Bills are going to be okay. Now, I know Spencer Brown had a rough year last year, but he's an effective right tackle. He had 11 pancake blocks in one game in college, so I have to believe he will put it together this season. You got James Cook at running back. Osiris Torrance is pushing Ryan Bates for the right guard job. Morse is back. Bills signed Connor McGovern, and they brought in the Rams left guard from last season, David Edwards, as a backup, and they also have Nick Broker as a third-string guard, and you have Quisenberry and Tommy Doyle as your backup tackles. So I love the Bills starters and depth on the offensive line. I think Kincaid and Knox a good 2 tight end set. Diggs, if Gabe Davis might step up in his contract here, and you got Khalil Shakir as your slot. So I think the Bills just have a lot of options right now in terms of their offense. I think this will be a top 5 offense once again. And I love the depth of defensive end and defensive tackle. I think the Bills have good cornerback depth. DeMar Hamlin's healthy again. So is Jordan Poyer, and so is Micah Hyde. So for me, the Bills are one of the most complete teams in the AFC. And they are actually my pick to win the AFC. I have them beating Jacksonville. Joey has the Bills beating Cleveland, but losing to Jacksonville in the AFC title game. But yeah, this is a team that, look at their schedule. They get the Jets, the Jaguars in London, with Jacksonville playing in London the previous week, being acclimated to the time zone. And this is a team that has a lot of pieces, a lot of talent. I have them losing to the Bengals and then the Eagles. Wait, I have them beating the Eagles. Who do I have the Bills losing to? Who's the 4th team? I think it's the Chargers. I think the Bills are on Peacock later in the season. And that's who I think I have the Bills. I think that's who I have the Bills losing to. Okay. So yeah, yes, I do. I have the Chargers beating the Bills in week 16. That's a Saturday game currently scheduled to air only on Peacock. So those are the 4 games I have the Bills losing. I have the Bills beating Philadelphia and Dallas, going unbeaten versus the NFC East. So, I mean, we'll see how this season plays out, because the Bills, they get the Eagles, they get the Chiefs and the Cowboys in a 3-week span, but they do get a bye week after the Eagles game. So that's the one positive for them. But I think this is one of the most complete teams in the AFC, along with the Bengals and the Jaguars. And there's a few other teams we could make a case for later in the show in the AFC. A brief overall impression of this Bills team before I get to the Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets?
The Bills are obviously going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. They got the quarterback, got the receivers. As long as the receivers are intact, we've reached on a little bit. Stephon Diggs wanting to trade. Whether that will happen, who knows? I doubt it, but it's a possibility.
It's not. Diggs clarified that the rumors about him wanting out are bogus.
In the AFC.
Diggs basically went on Twitter and said the rumors about him wanting out of Buffalo are bogus. They are misinformation. So that's been put to bed already.
Of course he did. Of course he did. What did you expect him to do? Go on and say, you know what, guys? These guys are scumbags, and I want out of here because they suck. You're not going to hear him say that. That's like saying, hey, Deshaun Watson said, I don't deserve to be an elite quarterback in the locker room. He's saying, guys, I am elite. Because it's just for the media. It's for the media hype. So I'm not going to, so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
When he's saying something like that, it's for the media. What's going behind closed doors, it may or may not be somewhere in between. Or he could put the trade under conditions. So it may have been hyped up. It might not be false. So, there's still that possibility, and we can't simply poo-poo it because he decided to go on social media and talk. Because, on social media and talk, a lot of people do that. It's like taking everything Elon Musk says and saying, man, he must be right 100% of the time. He's telling the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Absolutely not. Take social media as a grain of salt.
All right. But the Bills, like you said, Joey, like we said, they're going to be one of the best teams in the AFC East. I'm going to get to the Dolphins next. I think they are going to have a setback. Last year, the Dolphins were beneficiaries from an extremely easy strength of schedule. They have a much tougher strength of schedule this time around in Miami, and with no Jalen Ramsey until December, it's kind of like how the Dolphins didn't have Byron Jones as their number 2 corner to pair with Xavier Howard last year. I think that is going to hurt the Dolphins, and I have Miami finishing the year 8-9. And this is, I think the Dolphins take a step back this year. Teron Armstead, he got injured in practice. Luckily, he should be cleared to go for week 1, but he couldn't feel his leg, so that's not a good sign. And this is the second year in a row that Armstead's been dealing with some sort of injury in Miami, and he had 2 injuries in 3 years before that in New Orleans before the Saints decided to move on from Armstead. So if Armstead goes down, it means that the Dolphins would have to start somebody else. They'd have to start Isaiah Wynn at offensive tackle next to Austin Jackson. And I think that is a worst case scenario for Tua. I think if that were to happen, Tua probably would get another concussion in a matter of weeks. And I'm not saying he won't stay healthy. If Tua stays healthy, the Dolphins could easily be in the conversation to challenge. But I think it's hilarious because yesterday Total Pro Sports did a video of the toughest divisions in the NFL. AFC North came in at number 2. The AFC East came in at number 1. That's what I think is hilarious because I have 4 AFC North teams posting winning records this year. I think you'd agree with me, Joey, that the AFC North is probably the toughest division in football this season. So when somebody says the AFC East is all of a sudden better, that's the part that's hilarious. Nobody on the Dolphins is getting anyway. That's not what I was trying. I think it's hilarious that people think the AFC East is going to be tougher than the AFC North. That is very humorous to me.
I want to put it in perspective. I was watching some stuff from the media this morning, and what I found was, the media is so torn on the AFC North. Jason Rabin of Cincinnati beat writer for Cincinnati, and Adam the Bull from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show were going through their rankings, and they were similar. They admitted all 4 teams could potentially win this division. And they said, right now, roster-wise, the Browns and Bengals were the top 2, but culture-wise, the Steelers and Ravens could take it. So it's like, they both agreed the Bengals were probably going to win it, but it just shows that this AFC North wide open for the paper. What are you looking at? How are you thinking about how it's going to go and looking at everything from culture to talent? And when you get to the point, say, all 4 teams win the division, now you're looking at it and saying, damn, this is a division where whoever comes out of it might not get out of the second round simply because they beat each other up all year. That's a damn good division. And if one of these teams does win the Super Bowl, you're going to say, this may be one of the best teams in the last 20 years simply because they beat the crap out of each other. And they still won. So whoever says AFC North is not the best division in football this year, I've got to question it because everybody's saying the same thing. Maybe in a different context, but they're all saying the same thing. This is going to be a division where if you miss an division, you're probably missing out because this is going to be the best division of football, and they're just going to hit each other and they're going to beat each other to a ball.
Yes.
Any football fan with that holds their weight will love that.
And this is the thing, the AFC East gets the AFC West this year as the division they have to play, as the team they have to play in every division. And I honestly think the AFC West could end up being better than the AFC East. It really just comes down to whether Mac Jones or Jimmy Garoppolo has the better year. That's really the tiebreaker for me between the West and the East. Because last year, the AFC West got a lot of hype with Carr still in the division. Now he's on the Saints. And we're going to preview the AFC West later today. But I just think that is a very interesting.
The division I have the most sympathy for is the one with the Jags, Titans, Colts.
That's considered the weakest division in the AFC. That's the weakest division in the AFC. The AFC South. I mean, the NFC South is considered the weakest division in football.
I have the most sympathy for because they have to face that massive AFC North mess this year.
You're giving the AFC North more love than the Dolphins because we're talking about the Dolphins, and we both seem to agree the Dolphins are one of these teams that's going to take a step back this year.
I think they are. And I think it all depends on whether Tua will be able to survive. By the end of the year, he may end up being one of those cyber link play on Mortal Kombat, where they have to put his entire body and mind into a suit and just put his mind into a robot to keep him healthy, keep him alive. If anything happens on that offensive line, because they do not have depth on the offensive line, Tua may end up being a cyberlink play.
Yeah, I don't trust any of the running backs on the Dolphins. Dolphins have Selvin Ahmad and Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert. I don't trust any of their running backs. I don't trust. I do like Devin Achane, but I don't trust any of their running backs right now. I don't trust Durham Smythe. I think he's a number 2 tight end. I think the decision to move on from Gesicki, trade Hunter Long to get Jalen Ramsey, those are decisions the Dolphins could end up regretting. So that's why I have the Dolphins at 8 and 9. And I do love their front 7. But with Eli Apple replacing Jalen Ramsey until December, it completely changes their outlook. So that's something to take into consideration here. we'll get to the New England Patriots. I'll keep this as brief, as simple as possible. Patriots, top 10 defense. They have the only edge rusher tandem in Judon and Uche with 10 sacks last year. And they have all 5 corners coming back. Plus, they drafted Christian Gonzalez. So those corners that were 1 through 5 on the depth chart last year, they're all going to move down a spot on the depth chart, assuming they all make the team. And that's going to strengthen New England's cornerback depth. So it's going to be really tough to throw on New England. I do think teams are going to have success running the ball in the Patriots this year. I think the Patriots could have a top 10 pass defense. And whether they have a middle of the pack run defense, a top 10 run defense, or a bottom 10 run defense is ultimately going to be what determines their fate. But I have New England at 7-10. I have them losing the Eagles. And this is a team that I have starting 3-3 before 7. And then I have them losing 2 to Buffalo and Miami. I have them winning 2. So I have the Patriots at 5-5 heading into their Week 11 bye week. But I have them finishing 7-10, and I have them losing the Giants, beating the Chargers, because Justin Herbert's never beaten the Patriots in his career. So I do think Patriots could be 6-6 heading into those final 5 games, but I don't know what's going to happen after that. I'm just trying to pull up the schedule. It's just making me wait a little bit. Everything's going well on Restream. It's just taking a few seconds for the final weeks of the schedule to load. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. But looking at the Patriots, I only think Mac Jones gets a 5th-year tender unless one of 2 things happens. A, the Patriots in playoffs, or B, Mac Jones, because one YouTuber, C4, he's a huge Madden fan. He did a simulation where Mac Jones threw 40 touchdowns and finished 3rd in the NFL in touchdowns behind only Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. Either Mac Jones has to do that, 40 touchdowns, 3rd in the NFL in touchdowns, or he has to get the Patriots to the playoffs, or he's not getting a 5th-year tender. It's that simple. I know he had a great rookie year, but he had a massive blowback in his 2nd year. And I do have the Patriots winning the Week 18 game against the Jets, but I do have the Patriots losing to Pittsburgh. I have them losing to Kansas City at home, and I have them losing to Denver at home. Denver on the road in Denver, because New England's got to play Pittsburgh, Denver, and Buffalo on the road in the final 5 weeks of the season. They also host the Patriots. They also host the Chiefs and the Jets. So that's a brutal end game schedule for the Patriots. I do think this team will be 6-6 heading into the final 5 games. But they'll either finish the year 7-10 or 8-9 if they can beat the Steelers in Week 14. That's really what it comes down to. I don't think this is a playoff team, and that's just been the theme with the Patriots of the past few years. Beat the stronger team, beat the weaker teams, lose the stronger ones.
And my thought about the Patriots, I've watched a couple of their preseason games. They got a good-looking defense. They have a really good-looking defense. But their offense, I've got a lot of questions about their offense.
That's why I said this could be a top 10 defense, but also a bottom 10 offense, Joey. That's kind of the theme with the Patriots this year.
And I agree with that. I just don't. I mean, in the games I look at offensively, Bailey Zappi looked pretty good.
He was horrible last night against the Titans.
Also have Matt Jones. Okay, was that the last game?
Yeah, that was the last game. The Patriots essentially rested Mac Jones for the regular season. Bailey Zappi started against the Titans' first-team defense, and he was horrible against the Titans' first-team defense. To be fair, Bailey Zappi played well against second-team defenses, but not good enough against the first-team defense to say, okay, this guy might be able to start if something happens to Mac Jones.
And honestly, Patriots didn't look good last year with Mac Jones. So that I've heard positive reviews about Mac Jones this year. He's got his confidence back. He's looking to be the Alabama Mac Jones. We will see. Only time will tell.
You can talk shit about Mac Jones all you want, but right now, Mac Jones is the only quarterback in the 2021 draft with a winning record. Trevor Lawrence is 11-22 as a starter in the regular season. Mac Jones is 16-15. We'll see if that lasts at the end of the year. I do expect Lawrence to jump Mac Jones in terms of overall record. But the fact that Mac Jones has a winning record as a starter, and he's the only QB from that 2021 draft with a winning record, that's why he has a little bit more security than the other guys heading into year 3.
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk shit about Mac Jones. He's done a fine job. He's not been a superstar. But what I think time will tell about is he says he's back to Alabama Mac Jones. That's a big freaking statement because at Alabama, he was rolling one of the top completion percentages of all time in college football. Like 46 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, or whatever it was. I mean, that's a big statement to make.
Yeah.
And I think if we take that, just from what he says, great, his confidence is back. If you just take that from what it says at an NFL level, you're probably going to get your ass burned.
Yep.
Okay, because we have to wait and see on that stuff.
Maybe we'll have a Devonta Smith Mac Jones jersey exchange at the end of week 1 between the two former Alabama players, with Mac Jones holding up a Devonta Smith jersey and Devonta Smith holding up a Mac Jones jersey. I could see a jersey exchange between those two at the end of week 1.
Possible, but I do hold my reservation.
Yeah. The Jets are the next team.
And I think everybody else should as well.
Yes. The Jets are the next team we are going to preview. I've seen the Jets on Hard Knocks, HBO Max, you want to call it. It's been a fantastic show to watch. I haven't been Bill Becton and Juwan Brown are healthy. So that's great news for Aaron Rodgers. Now, the Jets wide receiver, Corey Davis, did retire earlier this week. So Green Bay not going to have as much depth as they once did, but I just think McCole Hardman should take over in that slot role because Corey Davis was going to be the slot guy to Garrett Wilson and Al Lazard. With him retiring.
I did hear about that this morning. I did hear a little bit about it. From what I understand, Corey Davis is going to be cut. And instead of testing free agency, he decided to retire. That was what I heard as of this morning.
I did not hear he was going to get cut. But he was a cap casualty. He took up a lot of cap space on that roster. So I can understand the thought process if that's the case. That might have been why. So
that might have been why he was going to be cut, because he took up a lot of cap space. And, right now cap space is something, especially teams with big quarterback numbers are looking to restructure, cut, and do all this, that, and the other this time of year. He might have been a casualty, and he said, I'm going through this shit again, and said he'd rather retire.
Yeah, you got Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook at running back. You've got a lot of options with this offense, and the defense was very stout last year. They even added more depth on the defensive line. I mean, the scariest thing with the Jets defensive line is Carl Lawson and John Franklin Myers are the starters. Their 2 first-round picks, Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, are the backups. So the Jets are going to have a lot of depth on the defensive line at both defensive end and defensive tackle. Tanzel Smart's making a lot of progress. The Jets rookies, they had to do like a rap song or sing a musical or do some form of improv or karaoke on the stage, and I think Quentin Williams, I think he just I think he just did like a spitball for fun as a joke when one of the actors did like a terrible told a terrible joke. Williams just threw a spitball for fun. The coaches, they gave him the benefit of the doubt because he's the commander on that defense. He is the leader. He is the presence of that defense. You do have Sauce Gardner as well, with him and Williams as like the two stars of that defense. But you have Mosley. They have Quincy Williams, former Jaguar, is a weak side linebacker. So there's a lot of talent on this Jets defense. They brought in Chuck Clark for depth to complement Ashton Davis and LaMarcus Joyner. And they have DJ Reed, who was a very good number 2 corner a season ago. I think the Jets' biggest weakness on defense is at safety, but I don't think it's a liability unless you have 2 tight ends or face a team with 2 tight ends or face a team with 3 tight ends. I mean, that's the thing with the Jets. I some people. I have this 10-7 getting a wild card. They could beat the Broncos in week 5. Now that we heard Judy got carted off during practice, that's a game I might flip. I currently have Denver winning that game, but that is a game I'm tempted to flip to the Jets now, because if Jerry Judy's out in week 5, I'll probably give the Jets a win there, which would make them wild card 2 over the Browns. But right now, I just think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I have the Jets winning 1 road game, and that is against the Raiders in week 10 at Allegiant Stadium, where Aaron Rodgers will play Devontae Adams. Now, we will have a jersey exchange for that game. We may not have a jersey exchange for Devonta Smith versus Mac Jones. I can guarantee you we're going to have a jersey exchange for Aaron Rodgers versus Devontae Adams, with Rodgers holding up the Adams Raider jersey and Adams holding up the Rodgers Jets jersey. I can guarantee that is going to happen because they're both mega stars.
And here, and this is earlier about the significance of today's game against the Chiefs, because you just said it with the Jets. It's like, because what we see here may change our perception of how the Chiefs and Browns seasons go. I don't think it's going to change too much on the Chiefs perception category, but with the Browns game. So it could flip that Jets-Browns final prediction for the preseason, because let's face it, we haven't done our preseason predictions yet. And so there are still a lot of things up in the air. And with that prediction, I mean, this last week, the Jets come out and dominate, and the Browns come out and hold their own with those 25 stats for the first.
I have the Jets starting 10-5, but losing the final 2 games to the Brown Patriots on the road. So I have the Jets at 10-5 entering week 17, but losing the Browns on Amazon Prime and then losing the Patriots at Gillette Stadium in week 18. So there's 3 games on this schedule that the Jets could flip. Theoretically, if they beat the Patriots, they beat the Browns, and they beat the Broncos, they're 13-4 with the Bills.
And that's why I'm looking heavily at this last week of the preseason, because I think it could be the table of how these teams at least start this season. And if they start the season on a high note, those in-game results, the significance of them could change. And that's why I'm looking at these games so highly.
Bills would still win the division at 13-4, because I have the Bills at 5-1 in the division. I have the Jets at 3-3. So even if the Jets beat the Patriots, the Broncos, and the Browns, they would be a 13-4 wild card. The Bills would be a 13-4 division winner.
Yeah.
The Jets would be a 13-4 wild card, and they would most likely get the 5 seed and either have to play the 4 seed.
And this is why we have said time and time again, the AFC is going to be a barn burner, folks, because when we're looking at all these possibilities, everything, we're looking at preseason games. We are looking at everything around it, because these AFC teams, this is going to be going out for blood, people.
And we're not done previewing the AFC. Later in the show, we will preview the AFC West. We're going to get to the NFC East now. I'll keep my Dallas summary as brief as possible because I did break down the entire Cowboys depth chart on YouTube when previewing the Cowboys. I did an 8-minute video Saturday after the podcast ended due to technical difficulties. And I have Dallas going 13-4. I have them tying the Eagles for the division. And because they are 10-2 versus common opponents and the Eagles are 9-3, the Cowboys win the division in this scenario. So the Eagles would get the wild card, but they'd probably beat the crap out of the NFC South winner. And I think they would beat the Niners in the divisional round if they were the 1 seed, setting up a Philly-Dallas NFC title game. I would not be surprised if this rivalry really turned it up a notch these next 2 years. I could see Dallas beating Philly in this year's NFC title, and then Philly beating Dallas in next year's NFC title once Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and some of these Eagles rookies gain a little bit more experience. So I would not be surprised if the volume on this rivalry got turned up to the maximum in these next 2 seasons. But looking at Dallas, I think this is a pretty complete team on paper. They did lose Damarian Overshown to an injury, and they did trade for Trey Lance. That news was a week ago if you want to put things into perspective. But for me, Dallas is my team to beat in the NFC this year. I have them actually winning the Super Bowl against Buffalo. So, and my surprise prediction, Joey, that's really going to knock your socks off is my Super Bowl MVP. I have rookie running back Deuce Vaughn winning Super Bowl MVP. He would be that's a really bold prediction. If you walked into Jerry Jones' office and told him Deuce Vaughn was going to win Super Bowl MVP this year, he'd probably tell you to get the fuck out of his office. And then he'd laugh at you.
So, Jerry Jones would probably say, well, I hope you're right, because that would mean that the Cowboys won the Super Bowl based on what Jerry Jones has done as the general manager, which after 25 years of failure, doesn't make Jerry Jones look pretty damn good. So Jerry Jones probably won't care who won Super Bowl as long as they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it was somebody he drafted. Well, look at them Cowboys. Yeah, he'd probably be pretty freaking happy at that. So I wouldn't think he'd have a problem. He'd probably mentally think they're full shit, because he'd probably be thinking Dak Prescott or somebody like that. But
I'm saying if Dak Prescott doesn't win, keep an eye on Deuce Vaughn, because he might be the guy who breaks out. The last time the Bills and Cowboys played in the Super Bowl, Emmitt Smith won MVP, and there's only been 1 Super Bowl MVP since that. It was Terrell Davis when the Broncos dethroned the Packers. So, yeah.
Deuce Vaughn's he was a good pick. I think he was a multi-talented rookie. If he ends up winning it, like, I could see worse candidates. You know, Cowboys got a few shift players that could possibly come in and win this Super Bowl MVP if they ended up there, just by getting a kick or two. So I can't complain if that scenario takes place.
Yeah. And next team I'll preview is the Giants. The Giants, they don't really have a number 1 receiver for Daniel Jones, but I think rookie Jalen Hyatt could emerge into that number 1 target. If he does, this is a team that could be closer to the 9-8 end of the spectrum than the 7-10. Because if you look at the depth chart, this is a 5-12, 7-10 team. If you look at the coaching, you can make the argument this is a 9-8 team. And I've got the Giants going 7-10. They get 10 road games in the first 11. They don't get 10 road games, but they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 of their road games are in the first 11 weeks of the season, Joey. They get 9 road games. 6 of those 9 road games are in the first 11 weeks of the season. I don't think that's ever happened with an NFL team. So that is definitely an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go out there. I watched Brian DeBall live. Yeah. As much as I don't like Daniel Jones, I think he is a subpar NFL quarterback. I would say Brian DeBall is, man, he is able, as soon as that he sees the game plans he comes up with, he can outcoach probably 2/3.
Brian Dable was never with the
NFL.
Brian Dable was never with the Jaguars. He was QB coach with the Jets during Favre's year. He was the receivers coach on the Patriots when the Patriots won 2 Super Bowls in 38. He's a 5-time Super Bowl champion. He was actually with the Patriots during the Spygate era when they won 3 Super Bowls. He was the tight ends coach on the team that won Super Bowl 49. And this says he was part of the Patriots. He was a tight ends coach on the Patriots team that won Super Bowl 51. So he was part of 5 of the Patriots' 6 Super Bowls. He was also the quarterback coach for the Jets when they had Eric Mangini. And then he became the Browns offensive coordinator in 09, 010. I believe Mangini took him to Cleveland. I could be wrong on that. And then he went to the Dolphins. And then he went to the Chiefs. And then he went back to the Patriots. And then Alabama hired him as their offensive coordinator. And he became the Bills' offensive coordinator. And the rest of his resume is history.
Yeah, I didn't mean that he coached for the Jaguars. I meant that he coached against the Jaguars last year when I was watching.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, they were smoked more times than once. But Brian DeBall, that team to victory. Like it or not, whatever it is about the controversy on the first down call, whatever, Brian DeBall seen that team victory. Because they would not have won that game without him and the way he maneuvered that. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, with DeBall potentially being a 2 or 3 win coach. He will add 2 or 3 wins to that team. Now, the question is that 2 or 3 wins going to be 7 to 8 wins? Or is it going to be 10 to 11 wins? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Because DeBall is worth 3 wins by himself. But where is that 3 wins?
I remember week 1 of last year, Daniel Jones committed a turnover against the Titans, and Brian Dable told Daniel Jones, get your shit together, or I'm going to give someone else a shot. I think that lit a fire under Daniel Jones' ass, and he started to play a lot better after that. Now, is he anything more than an above-average quarterback that got a huge salary? No, not to me he isn't, but that lit a fire under Daniel Jones' ass, and I think it changed the outlook for the team ever since.
Yeah, and Dable can do that. He can put you in a place, and it's one of the things when it was rumored a couple years ago, before he was hired by the Bills, that DeBall was going to come back as the Browns OC. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it was something that Brown fans got excited about because we knew the type of coach DeBall was. We knew he was innovative. We knew he was a motivator. We knew what he was. And with the Giants, I think we're seeing him at his fullest potential because we're seeing all the innovation. We're seeing the 2 or 3 wins, just having him involved per year. When we're seeing all this, and everything that, Browns fans thought were getting, that Bills fans ended up getting and loved about him, and the Giants fans are like, why the hell didn't we know about this guy before?
I have the Giants going 8 on the road.
It's so good.
I have the Giants going 1-0 with their only road victory coming against the Cardinals in week 2. So that's why I'm very bullish on the Giants right now. They play the Cowboys at home. They play the Bills on the road. They play the Niners on the road in week 3. They get the Seahawks at home. I think they can play spoiler against Seattle, but that's going to be a tough game as well. And if Seattle wins that game, you're looking at 6-11 as the projection instead. But I mean, I do like their defense. If Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari are healthy, look out. They have Dexter Lawrence, who got that huge contract extension. Andrew Thomas, they paid him more money than Trent Williams. We talked about that last week. You can go back and listen to Joey's rant on that if you want. After this podcast, you can go back into TalkShoe and listen to episode 853 because we're currently recording 854. But yeah, you can listen to that. They did draft Deontay Banks in the first round, the Maryland corner. He's going to have his hands full. I think he's great in man, but I feel like his zone and press, he's going to need a little bit of time to develop that. But I did like him coming out of Maryland. I felt like the only question with him was maybe the speed, maybe the foot speed, maybe his zone press needs a little improvement. Not a lot. He was pretty good at Maryland, pretty complete corner for the most part. He was injured the year Ohio State ran it up on Maryland in C.J. Stroud's pre-draft year when he had Olave and who's the other guy I'm thinking of? There were 2 Ohio State receivers. There was Olave and there was the Garrett Wilson, rookie of the year. Okay. But yeah, the Eagles are the next team we're going to preview. And like Dallas, they are pretty complete at every position from quarterback to special teams. They're has good players at every position. They've got 2 number 1 receivers in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. They've got the league's, I would argue they've got the NFC's best center in Jason Kelce. They've got a very good defense with Josh Sweat back at right end. You have a trio of Cox, Jalen Carter, and Jordan Davis. The Eagles did sign Myles Jack, but he announced his retirement. That may ultimately end up being the difference. That Nakobe Dean's healthy though, so I mean the Eagles should be more competitive, just as competitive as last year. There really shouldn't be a drop off, and I have the Eagles losing their first game to the Jets in Week 6. But if they win that game, you're looking at the Eagles being 9-0 entering the bye week. Because the Eagles get the Patriots on the road, they get the Vikings at home, Tampa on the road, Washington at home, the Rams on the road, the Jets on the road, the Dolphins at home. They go to Washington to face the Commanders, and they face Dallas at home before the bye week. Honestly, I think the Eagles, if they can beat the Jets, this is a team that's 9-0 entering the bye week before they head to Kansas City in Week 11. So, and I have Philadelphia losing to Dallas, have them losing to the Bills at home, and I have them losing to Seattle on the road in Week 15. But other than that, I think they're a pretty complete team for the most part. And I have them going 13-4. They get the wild card. They beat the NFC South champion, and they knock the 1 seed Niners out of the playoffs to set up a Philly-Dallas NFC title game in Arlington. So that's kind of how I think this is going to play. It should be very interesting either way. But the Eagles are one of the most complete teams in the NFC. I know that you have them in your NFC title game as well. And I even though I don't think they are a Super Bowl team this year, I think they could be next season in 2024 with all the young talent they've got. So we'll see. I mean, this is a team, if Dallas doesn't come out of the NFC, it could very easily be the Eagles again for the second year in a row, and might be the Eagles for a third year in a row in 2024. That's just how deep the Eagles are right now. Their long-term stability is through the roof. And you have to think Hurts is going to get a Super Bowl at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. You have to, next 4 years maybe, I don't know. But I think it will happen at some point. I just think they've got too much talent not to go all the way at some point. And I know it's a team that took the NFL by storm, made believers out of us, and Howie Roseman had an excellent draft. So, yeah, I mean, Eagles, I think they're in the same class as Dallas as one of the top 2 teams in the NFC. Anything you want to add before we get to the Commanders? Offensive line's good. The tight end situation's good with Goddard. I mean, Darius Slay's still there.
The big thing that I'm looking at here with the Eagles is I'm looking at the development of the running back position, because we know that those receivers are going to develop. They're too young. They're too dang good. We know Jalen Hurts is going to continue to grow. I've been a Jalen Hurts supporter since he was at Alabama. That is one of those quarterbacks I've never rooted from, and he has been nothing short of spectacular. I think the entire thought process between the Eagles and how well they do, they have to continue to develop their running back situation, because they're good, but with the NFC, as much as the AFC is known for their offense, NFC is good for their defense, so they're going to have to keep developing that running game.
Well, they've got DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, and Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott. So they have just as much depth at the running back position as last year, despite losing Miles Sanders, who I think is just going to take off in Carolina this season.
Yeah, they do. I'm just looking for which one of those guys are going to break out. They got potential, though. If they don't keep pushing at the position and reach their potential, then it's going to be a little more difficult. And let's face it, I think it was said best by one of the satire guys I look at, as long as Georgia keeps producing stars, the Eagles are going to be good. It's about 10 years ago, what was it? That one team that stayed good because they kept drafting Ohio State guys. And I think that's going to be the same thing with, the Eagles. They're going to keep drafting Georgia guys. As long as Georgia's good, the Eagles are probably going to be good. As weird as that sounds, but it's a formula that's worked in the past. And so if you look at it that way, the Eagles are going to keep being good.
Yep. And then you've got the Washington Commanders, the last team in this division. I have the Commanders.
Addition by subtraction.
I've got the Commanders at 4-13.
Addition by subtraction. Daniel Snyder equals better numbers and better win total. Simply because Daniel Snyder is nowhere near this team. Daniel Snyder was a albatross with this team. They will be better because in walks Magic Johnson, out walks Daniel Snyder.
Well, Josh Harris is the owner. Josh Harris is the owner of the Commanders. Magic Johnson's a co-owner, but Josh Harris.
He's the majority owner, but if you don't think Magic Johnson is not going to walk in there and his presence isn't going to mean something, then you obviously never look at Magic Johnson and what his very presence does to people.
Well, I want to focus on Harris because Harris is the owner of 2 other professional sports teams, the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah.
So
what I'm talking about is the everyday appearance of a guy who lights up the room, who makes everybody believe that not just owns the team, but makes everybody believe that they can win and that they can be their best. Just because he walked in the room, he doesn't even have to say anything. You look at him and you look at him and the presence that he has. That's a hell of a presence to have.
It is.
He has shown it even in the movie theater when he opened Magic Theaters in Los Angeles. He looked at that. People would be at the reception desk and they would immediately perk when they saw him. Their their thought process would change. And that comes from employees. Like, his presence is one that has rarely been seen, not only in sports, but in business. Where you look up and you say, we're as great as anybody else simply because this guy just happened to appear out of thin air. I mean, that's magic.
Yeah.
Larry Bird said it best. He's a con man.
I mean,
he's a con man. He makes you believe that everything's God. Everything's great, you know? And so Larry Bird said it best. He's a con man. He's a con man in the best way possible for anything he's involved with.
Yes.
It always excels. And I think that is what I'm looking at there, that he'll walk into that locker room and everybody will be like, we got this.
But the thing I'd like to get at is the teams Harris owns never took off without the right GM, right front office people. You look at the 76ers. When they had Brian Colangelo and trusted the process, they were able to get Joel Embiid and Bill Simmons. And Simmons had early success before fading, like his first few years in the league. And Embiid's now one of the top star players in the NBA at center for the 76ers. But after it was rumored that Colangelo created burner accounts, he got fired from the 76ers, and they've just been juggling front office people since that. They've brought great people as well.
Eric Colangelo's paying week was amazing when it came to front office personnel, being coaches, and so on and so forth. Colangelo's were just as good as anybody in the recent memory of basketball.
But you look at the Devils' front office, right?
Based on burner accounts, it's just stupid.
You look at the Devils.
It is what it is.
Yeah, but you look at the Devils. They have Tom Fitzgerald as general manager. They have Kate Madigan. She's only 29. She's already the assistant GM. They have Martin Brodeur as like a scout and a consultant on that staff. And then they have Lindy Ruff as their head coach. And their assistant head coach ended up taking a head coaching gig. And New Jersey's one of these teams that's really drafted well in the NHL. They got 2 number 1 picks, Nico Hischier, their captain, Jack Hughes. This is a team that has a lot of talent. And they've drafted well. They got Luke Hughes, the younger brother of Jack Hughes, Simon Nemec. Okay, I know I'm boring Joey with the hockey information, but my point is that the New Jersey Devils, under the ownership for the Commanders, and that's the thing. Commanders owner Josh Harris. The Devils brought in the right people under Josh Harris. So yeah. The Devils brought in the right people under Josh Harris, and they thrived as a result. They got back to the playoffs. I thought they were going to be a year away. They got back to the playoffs a year early, and they went out. They spent their cap money to re-sign their core players to long-term contracts. So now they have a longer window of opportunity to compete for a Stanley Cup. So I think their situation is really interesting. And I think it's going to be cool to see what happens with the Commanders. But as far as the Washington Commanders go, I think the Commanders, I have them at 4-13. You look at what's going on with the Commanders. You have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson as really the only star players on this fence. I don't trust Howell or Brissett yet. Howell did win his first start against Dak Prescott. That is worthy of being mentioned. And it's one of these things where you have to look at the details of what this roster brings to the table. I think the Commanders, they have a lot of tight end depth. Logan Thomas, John Bates, Cole Turner. They have a lot of running back depth. Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. I think their offensive line does. The fact that Washington's offensive line lacks a star player puts them at a major disadvantage in the NFC East. The reason I say that is you look at the Cowboys. They have Zach Martin. The Eagles have Jason Kelsey. The Giants have Andrew Thomas. Commanders don't really have a star player on the offensive line. And every team in that division has an amazing front seven. The Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants all have remarkable front sevens. So, as I was saying before Joey resumed on the call, the Devils, they hired the right people. Josh Harris hired the right people. Fitzgerald, Madigan, Brodeur. It allowed the Devils to turn things around. And if he hires him and Magic Johnson hire the right people, the Commanders will be a good team in 5 years in due time. But I don't know if they have the right personnel yet. Ron Rivera would have to pull a rabbit out of his hat in order to save the Commanders' season, because I don't know if either Howell or Brissett is a long-term starter. I think Howell's ceiling's a little higher, but at the same time, I'm not sure if he's going to take that next step. He's earned the benefit of the doubt after beating Dallas over Brissett. He's earned the right to be the starter.
Ron Rivera is a really good coach. Ron Rivera has been put in a really bad spot. Now, the ones I would be looking at right now, I think it's going to start with the general manager, president of the team, general manager, vice president. That situation. But I think Ron Rivera, everybody's going to realize he's a really good coach. He'll be able to keep the ship with the right personnel. He may even be able to right the ship. But the problem is, if you don't have the guys above him, it's not going to work. He may not be able to right the ship, but he may be able to keep the ship.
And look, Martin Mayhew enters year 3 as Washington's GM. He took over in 2021 as the GM. So apparently the Commanders, I guess they fired their GM after making the playoffs under Dan Snyder, because Martin Mayhew took over as the GM in January of 2021. And I believe that was the year the Commanders, that was the season after the Commanders made the playoffs, Joey, because the Commanders won the division in 2020 and lost to Tom Brady in the wild card round in 2021. So Dan Snyder fired his GM after winning the division. And I don't know if Mayhew's the guy. Opportunity to impress Magic and Josh Harris, but if he doesn't, I think they're going to bring their own guy in. They'll probably bring their own head coach in too. That's just the reality of the situation. And I agree, Rivera is a good coach. But the big reason Eric Bieniemy left Kansas City is because Washington made him assistant head coach, meaning he'd be interim head coach if anything happened to Rivera mid-season. And I love Washington's defense. If Chase Young can stay healthy, he could be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. That's what a radio person on 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh said last week. I do agree with that. So, I mean, this is a very good Washington defensive line now that everybody's healthy. Payne, Allen, Montez Sweat. You add KJ Henry in the draft for depth. You've got Jamin Davis.
I do want to make a point with the Bieniemy. This is what happened with the coordinator under contract with the nation. Now coaching, which he's older guy, can't allow that to happen. That, but without that designation,
those other teams have good starters at their position offense, but also have starters on the offensive line. Washington probably right. Nice stopgaps, yes, but no. They got rid of Andrew or the tackle is guarding a contract here. So there are some changes. This team, the Giants back Commander. I mean, as it's being productive as a unit, but it's not a unit in the back.
I think they have potential on the offensive line. I don't think they're going to wow people on the offensive line. And as a side note, to get people excited, they did say, new ownership did say they weren't against changing the name of the Commanders because they're not thrilled with it. So that's just something for the fans to be happy about. The fans to get excited about. I feel like, if we didn't mention it, it would, it would kind of take away from the team.
And as long as you don't change the name of your team from the Washington Commanders to the Washington Nerds, you'll be okay. Because if you change your name to the Washington Nerds, you'll have to put a photo of Dan Snyder as the logo, and that just will not go well with the fan base. That will not go well with the fan base. So I'd advise against that.
Yeah, I would consider, just my personal preference, the Washington Wildfire, because
I like the Washington.
Every time they come out of the ramp,
why? Because the replacements with Sentinel uniform.
Sentinels were. You could have Wolverine lead the team
out. Covered all the AFC took it to the Austin Matthews track. 13 point years. Not over 5 years, Matthews. So he'll be
what needed on it. I said the monumentous ship type move. It was a really good move, and you covered what needed to be covered there. I think it works.
Yeah. And it's going to make Toronto competitive. It's a player they needed to bring back. The other news involves Steven Strasburg. The Washington Nationals pitcher announced his retirement. And since the Nationals did not put any insurance under the contract, they have to pay Strasburg for the next 3 years, even after he retired. So, Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, if you're listening to this, make sure there is insurance, or make sure the contracts are front-loaded so you can buy the player out after 2 or 3 years. Take note on this. Because what the Nationals did is something you don't want to do as a franchise. So, just letting you know, that's kind of what happened. And Strasburg was great. Number 1 pick in the MLB draft. He was very good for many years, and he put everything together when he left 20 World Series. Every he had a year left. He'll start 4. Nationals are going to have to him 3. Much the Strasburg, because it's unfortunate. Because I was back because that happened. The Nationals have a now this.
Well, we were always talking about Strasburg as being one of the exceptional talents. So it is a shame. I wished he could have recovered, but my hope is that his injury doesn't affect his everyday life outside of hockey.
You mean
Because
baseball?
he had an exceptional career.
Yeah.
Baseball, sorry.
No problem.
I'm used to talking about hockey with you. We don't usually talk baseball. I'm sorry.
No problem.
But yeah, but I hope that the exceptional player he was, it does not affect him off the field, because he deserves better than that, because he was one of the premier players in the league for a time.
Yeah, he was. Definitely early in his career and later in his career. Top of the checking the notes I texted this. Yes, the SEC preview is next, and you'll have top for the playoff in Georgia in the SEC. Save those teams. And preview. Start with a team Joey wanted to talk about. Florida running back. Persall's our wide receiver. Marshall Jr. second round pick of 24. That's the Gators and worse than last year, but is potentially better. Potential.
Yeah, to me about the game. Athletic, they may be more athletic than last year. Every indication, because the players are focused more than they were last year, and something going on behind the scenes last year that was, but that's what I've heard from what I saw last year between some of these young guys. I thought the safeties and corners were flying all over the field last year, especially the young guys. The offense, I thought the offense was really, really ready to go.
last year, but something was holding them back. So I think this year, with the accounts that they're more prepared, they're more focused, I think they could be better this year.
Yeah, I mean, they do play Georgia in Jacksonville on October 28th. They play Tennessee at home. That could go either way. It just depends on who steps up between Joe Milton and Graham Mertz. They play LSU on the road. They play Florida on the road. They play Kentucky on the road, South Carolina on the road. Florida is projected to go 5-7 this year, according to Athlon Sports. I see Utah, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Now, it might be 4-8 fifth, so I think their floor is lower than where Athlon is projecting them. I think their floor is 4-8. Their ceiling would be 6-6 in a bowl game. It just depends on where they end up. So, next up is Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, they rehired their offensive coordinator from the 2021 season. He is back with Kentucky and replacing Will Levis, who officially signed his deal with Hellmann's, a lifetime contract with Hellmann's mayonnaise. There's even photos of him taking the Hellmann's mayonnaise and pouring it in coffee. But replacing Mr. Mayonnaise Man is Devin Leary, the North Carolina State quarterback. Kentucky also brought in Northern Illinois left tackle Marquez Cox, who, frankly, I think would have been a day 3 pick had he declared last year. So you get Marquez Cox in the transfer portal from Northern Illinois. Leary in the transfer North Carolina. He's back at left guard, right guard, right tackle. Tavian Robinson led Kentucky in receiving yards last year. You have Barry and Brown, another impact receiver, only a sophomore, but could be the best player on this offense. And Vanderbilt running back Roy Davis also in Kentucky through the transfer portal. I think Kentucky's going to be 5-0 heading into their game against Georgia. I really do. I think they probably lose to Georgia. Now they get Missouri and Tennessee at home this year. Can Devin Leary pull off some signature SEC wins after struggling in the ACC? Because he led North Carolina State to an unbeaten start before losing to Clemson. Can he rebound and pull off some signature games? I mean, Kentucky gets Alabama at home too. Honestly, I really wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky went 10-2 or 9. And honestly, if Kentucky can beat Missouri, Tennessee, and Alabama at home, this is a team that could be 11-1 if they, because their only tough road games are at Georgia and at South Carolina. They get everybody else home. Leary can this year. This game that could surprise a lot of people in the SEC this year, Joey. I still think we've grown Georgia from the ranks, but do not sleep on the next. We're going to do Tigers. Kentucky team before we get to Missouri.
Yeah, and that looking at in here.
Jackson backer for Kentucky has a lot of weapons on offense and his tackle plus back offense. I just of course. And is our team we're going to preview the Brady Burton tackle Xavier Del I do Terry and Chad and Abrams Drain Missouri and juniors back at and these this is a really good Austin they can be 7. Maybe a lot of heading into the November, and see Florida at home and Arkansas on the road. So sleep on a team like Kentucky. These two teams could theoretically
top 8. I don't think they have that type of talent. I think they have a out player. As any show.
both Missouri and Kentucky have very favorable holes, but neither team is favored to finish in the East. That current distinction belongs to Tennessee in a bit. South Carolina, they've got Spencer Rattler. They've got that receiver we done on one podcast. They got Marcel Style at corner. Honestly, there's not a lot of there down to what Rattler, what the freshman, what their senior cornerback is. The team that lost the Horn, lost a 2 corner draft. They lost Derek Rush, and then they lost the other corner, Cam. South Carolina lost 20 NFL, lost Cam Smith, and they lost Darius Rush. They also lost quite a bit on defense. They lost players. So, and he transferred to Florida State. So, for me, South Carolina, I am selling them, but South Carolina is projected to finish the year 7-5. Best case scenario, they beat North Carolina and Furman before doing horrible against Georgia. And they get Tennessee on the road this year. They get Missouri on the road, Texas A&M on the road. They get Clemson at home, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. I do kind of agree with the 7-5 projection. If they win all of their home games, if they beat North Carolina and Furman, they're 2-0. Mississippi State's 3, Florida 4, Jacksonville State is 5. So theoretically, they should be 7-5. I do think that's a good and realistic projection. I would have to agree with that, but I really don't see much that wows me with South Carolina yet. But they are going to play North Carolina next week. That's a game we'll talk about when we break down our week 1 predictions in a week from now. But I really don't see a lot of talent that stands out roster at the moment. And really, the only aspects are Rattler and their cornerback. So look him down. 1 college football show we do. That's still to decide. What are your thoughts on South Carolina before we get to Tennessee? Then we'll the AFC and just at the end.
Potential out of any of these teams, three, but they also have potential to finish bottom 3. This is the epitome of a boom or bust team that we have this year. They're going to be great or they're not going to be great. I don't think there's any in between.
Yes. Right now, Tennessee is number 12 in the AP poll. They have Joe Milton III taking over for Hendon Hooker at quarterback. They have Brew McCoy back at tight end. They have Brew McCoy back at receiver. He was the slot guy to Tillman and Hyatt last year. Now he's going to be the number 1 guy. And Brew McCoy, 52 receptions, 667 yards, 4 touchdowns as the number 3 guy. And he was the number 2 guy when Tillman was injured. So he does have that experience. Jacob Warren is going to be the tight end. You have Cooper Mays, the younger brother of Cade Mays, at center. Javonte Spraggins is your right guard. Spraggins did play a little bit of a tackle last year as well. Eric Acker, 76 tackles. He led at middle linebacker, and below at corner. I mean, some 10, but this is a team that is a lot of talent. There's a lot of small, and be the second best team in the SEC East behind Georgia. This is also a team that could attack if Milton can't replace Hooker and the passing game just falls apart without Hooker, Tillman, and Hyatt, which is a possibility. I mean, there's enough talent for Tennessee to be just as good as they were a season ago, but there's also a chance this team reverts with the talent they're losing from this year's NFL draft.
Yeah. And this is a unique situation because they ended up Tillman got injured, which left the door open for Hyatt.
And it left the door open for Brew McCoy.
Profile pick. It left Hyatt ended up being a great talent. It let his talent show. Then Tillman came back. He wasn't what he was, but at the same time, he was still a great talent. And then you had Hooker, who was a stabilizing quarterback with really high talent. And then I believe he got hurt. But there were still high talented players. You know, Tennessee was one of football. So it's a lot to fill.
Yes.
A lot of big shoes.
If Cole White, Keaton can step up, wide receiver and be the second best SEC. This would fall back to third if change and pivot from Malavia, which season plays out.
You know, it's going to be interesting. So, you know, in the thought that they are but really so they're kind of boom or bust, but they're kind of in the middle with a lot more upside.
Well, the team, that final SEC East team, I misspoke when I said Tennessee was the final SEC East team. Final SEC East team is actually Vanderbilt, who is projected to go 4-8, 1-7 in the SEC. Vanderbilt has Will Shepard at receiver, 60 receptions, 776 yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. And they also have DeRicky Wright at free safety, who led the team with 3 interceptions. But Julian Hernandez and Bradley Ashmore are seniors at center and right guard. Vanderbilt is really high on sophomore A.J. Swan, who came in and started as a true freshman. Vanderbilt's coaching staff believes A.J. Swan has the best arm for a Vanderbilt quarterback dating back to Jay Cutler, which is a pretty lofty comparison when you're the starting quarterback at Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is currently going through a stadium renovation, so I don't know if they're going to be playing at Vanderbilt or if they're going to be moving the location of their stadium. The stadium renovation going on, I don't know what's going to happen there. So I'm excited for Vanderbilt, SEC team. Kentucky, they get Georgia at home, they get Auburn at home, they get Tennessee on the road. Honestly, I see 2 schedule. Vanderbilt leader in the East. They're but this team will see.
Vanderbilt is they're there. I don't even see them being able to hit a couple upsets.
I mean, the team 7, Athlon Sports has 8. Honestly, I think after they beat Hawaii and Alabama A&M, Alabama A&M sweep 2 games to lose every schedule because they got to go away. They play UNLV at Allegiant Stadium. So as soon as the Broncos, I believe the Raiders open up the season at home against the Broncos. I'm going to look that up briefly. The Broncos in week 1. I don't remember if it's in Denver. Oh, no, it's in Denver. So the Raiders play in Denver in week 1. And then I'm not sure if the Raiders, I'm pulling up the Raiders schedule briefly because I want to see how quickly their construction crew is going to have to pivot from UNLV to the Raiders. How quickly their crew is going to have to pivot in week 2. That's really the only reason. And the Raiders play the Bills on the road in week 2. So the Raiders home opener is against the Steelers on Peacock and NBC on September 24th. So the Raiders home opener is against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football in week 3. The Raiders have to go on the road the first 2 weeks. So UNLV, they're going to have Allegiant Stadium all to themselves when they host Vanderbilt. Is that a potential trap game? We'll see, because that is an NFL stadium that Vanderbilt has to go to. They could win that game, but they could also lose that game. For me, that's a toss-up because they're playing in Allegiant, and then they play the SEC the rest of the year. I think the floor for Vanderbilt's 2-10, and I think the ceiling is 4-8. And I think a realistic projection is 3-9. If you think they're going to beat UNLV, it just depends. But I really don't see much. Get to the SEC West now. We'll start with Arkansas. Arkansas, they have KJ Jefferson at quarterback, Rocket Sanders at running back, draft eligible prospect at running back, by the way. And this is a team that also has, they also have a really decent left guard in Brady Latham. And then on offense, and then at defense, their best player is Dwight McGlothern. Their safety, I think, Jaden Catan entered the transfer portal. But Dwight McGlothern had 4 interceptions last year, and he's really the catalyst for the defense. So Arkansas is interesting. They should be 3-0, and they should demolish their non-conference opponents, West Carolina, Kent State, BYU. But they go to LSU on September 23rd. They host Texas A&M in Jerry World. They get Ole Miss on the road, Alabama on the road, Mississippi State at home, Florida on the road. They got to go to the Swamp, Auburn, and then they get Florida International on November 18th, and then Missouri to end the year. Arkansas is one of these teams that's going to start out hot, and they could potentially end the year hot with home games against Auburn, Florida International, and Missouri. But overall, 6-6, 5-7. Their ceiling is 7-5, 5-7. I think 6-6 with a bowl game is a realistic projection. It just depends, because they're a team that I could see starting the year hot, ending the year hot, with 3 home games against Auburn, Missouri, Florida International, and then they get 3 home games against West Carolina, Kent State, and BYU to begin the season. So, and they get West Carolina in Arlington, and then they get Texas A&M at the Liberty Bowl this year. So that's Arkansas's outlook in a nutshell. But KJ Jefferson, I do like him as a dual threat, but he's got to improve his progressions and decision-making if Arkansas is going to do any damage against the SEC opponents. Because I think they're going to start 3-0, and I think they have a chance to go 3-0 to end the year. With Auburn and Florida International, it may come down to them beating Missouri for a bowl game. But Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss on the road, Alabama on the road, Mississippi State at home. They might upset Mississippi State with Will Rogers. That's a tough game. That's a pick 'em. That's a home game for Arkansas. And then they get Florida on the road. That is a daunting middle of the season schedule for Arkansas. They get winnable, and they get 3 home games to end the year that are winnable. So they should make a bowl game at 6-6. I mean, that's kind of where I see Arkansas. But your impression on this Razorbacks team before we get to Auburn?
They've got potential, and they're not I don't think they're going to challenge for the conference championship, but much like our last team there in Vandy, I don't think they're going to be the team that is going to do too much overall. I think they're just going to be there.
They might make a bowl game simply due to the fact that they get some home games to begin and end the season, but they're not going to be an exciting team when they got to take on real big-time opponents. And that's pretty much the verdict with Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's schedule is harder. But yeah, let's get to Auburn. They've got 3 key players, Jaquez Hunter at running back and the cornerback tandem of Nehemiah Prickett and DJ James. A really nice cornerback tandem. They're only returning starters outside of Jaquez Hunter, who was the number 2 running back to Tank Bigsby last year. But now he's going to be the number 1 running back. He's going to be replacing Bigsby. So, and it was Robbie Ashford who led the Auburn in passing and rushing yards. Ashford had more rushing yards as a dual threat than Jaquez Hunter, but Ashford's a sophomore. He played as a true freshman. And it's an Auburn team that only has 3 returning starters, and Ashford's really the only guaranteed starter among this group. And I think Auburn could be 3-0. They're going to lose to Texas A&M, Georgia, LSU. They should lose to Ole Miss this time around again. Mississippi State, they get them at home. That is a game where it was a shootout last year. They get Vanderbilt on the road. That could be a 4th win. They get New Mexico State at home. So I see Auburn going 5-7. But again, can they beat Mississippi State at home? I think that's what their bowl season is going to come down to. Can they upset Ole Miss or beat Mississippi State at home? that's ultimately going to determine if Auburn gets a bowl game or if they're missing out. Because I think they're in a similar situation with Arkansas. Favorable schedule allows them to go 6-6, maybe sneak into a bowl game, but they're not a serious contender to win the SEC West. This was a team that fired their coach last season, late in the year.
Well, I'm one of those people who think, Auburn last year was probably a year away. They had a lot of good talent. Unfortunately, Tank is not going to be involved in the situation. But at the same time, I think they have the potential to do a little bit of damage within the conference. So we're looking at a team still unproven, still a hell of a lot of potential. But if you really look at it for what it is, they can do some stuff. And they can be really good. But they could also be middle of the pack.
Yeah.
But I think they could at least break a few hearts, if nothing else.
Yep. Next up is LSU. LSU, they have Jaden Daniels is back at quarterback. Malik Neighbors is at wide receiver. Will Campbell, really good as a freshman left tackle. And this LSU team returns start offensive line. And he is back entering his sophomore season. Starters returning on offense. They have Mason Smith at defensive tackle, who will be suspended for the first game against Florida State. Mekhi Wingo and Smith, I think the defensive tackle situation looks good. Harold Perkins Jr. could be a player to watch as a outside linebacker off the edge, 7.5 sacks as a freshman. He enters his sophomore season. But overall, I think LSU lost a lot of defensive talent, Joey, and I think that could be what hinders them from another SEC championship appearance more than anything else. But the offense could run it back despite losing Keyshawn Bout. They have a lot of offensive talent returning. And LSU is going to go as far as their offense takes them this year because, yes, this is a team that could be undefeated heading into Alabama. They get Florida State. If they beat Florida State, they get Grambling, Mississippi State on the road. That could be a trap game, but if they win that, they're 3-0. Arkansas at home. They get Ole Miss on the road. Ole Miss might upset LSU. That is a game. That is a genuine trap game for LSU. Missouri, Auburn, Army. If you beat Ole Miss, you're 5-0. So 6, 7, 8. So you could theoretically be 8-0 heading into Alabama. And Alabama and Ole Miss are the toughest games on LSU's schedule. They get Texas A&M at home this year. They get Florida and Georgia State at home. So LSU, I think their floor is 8-4, and I think their ceiling is 10-2. And I think if they were to go 10-2, they would probably lose to Ole Miss and to Alabama. But they could lose to Florida State as well. But those are the three. I think we're in agreement. Those are the three toughest games on this LSU schedule. But if they were to win all those games, they would be back to the SEC title versus. So, again.
Yeah, if they won all those games, yes. I don't think they're going to win all those games. I think there's going to be a dip, especially in defensive talent this year. But they've had so much defensive talent over the last few years, that's not a surprise. So I'm not shocked, but at the same time, I'll say this will probably be a down year for them.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if they rebounded next year.
I have LSU at 10-2 this year, losing to Ole Miss and Alabama. They could lose that third game to Florida State, too. I mean, without Mason Smith, their best defensive player, that's a game Florida State might end up winning. Because I think Smith played in that game as a rotational guy, but he also got injured in that game and missed the rest of the season. So Mississippi State, they have Will Rogers back at quarterback. That's a guy we've talked about on the podcast. Jaden Wally's the number one receiver. They also have Rufus. So they have and Hard to Joe Quavian Marks, 582 rushing, Jet Johnson had 115 tackles at weak side linebacker. Nathaniel Watson had 6 sacks at middle linebacker. So with Mississippi State, they have their linebackers and this passing game that are the real standouts. Secondary has 4 new starters. Mississippi State runs a nickel defense, but DeCamry and Richardson is the only returning starter on this defense. And this is a team that lost Emerson and Forbes to the NFL draft. They've been very good at corner the last 2 drafts. If Richardson can put it together, he could be the 3rd corner on this Mississippi State cornerback room that's drafted in the past 3 years. But I just look at their schedule. They get Arizona at home. They get LSU at home in the 3rd game. South Carolina on the road. Alabama at home. Western Michigan. So I see 3 wins so far. I honestly think Mississippi State's going to take a step back. And I think that's largely due to Mike Leach passing away, unfortunately. Zach Arnett is 1-0. He did coach the final game for Mississippi State last year after Mike Leach passed away.
Well,
So,
yeah, and that was a sad time because, and I'm wondering how the school is going to rebound from that, because if you remember, the first play of the last game, they set up a traditional Mike Leach offensive set, and they let the play clock run out, and thankfully the refs did not put a penalty on it, I don't think. They knew what was happening. I think Mississippi State, at the very least, is going to finish probably close to the top of their division, just talent-wise alone. But I think that team is going to be on an emotional high. This is the season for Mike Leach, their leader, their friend, their mentor. This is going to be a year for Mike Leach, and I think that they could make a huge leap in this year.
Interesting. Ole Miss, I love the boldness in Joey's prediction, but the next team we're going to bring up is their Mississippi State's Egg Bowl rival, Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, they've got some offensive pieces. Jackson Dart, Quishon Judkins at running back, Jordan Watkins at receiver, Caleb Warren at center, and Jeremy James at right guard. I don't really see that stand out. They do have 2 returning starters at safety. But yeah, they lost their defensive end to the Ravens in the 3rd round of this year's NFL draft. May have been the 4th round, but regardless, this is a team that I think has lost some pieces on the front 7. I'm not sure they'll recover, but I think their offense will keep them in a lot of games. Because Judkins and Zach Evans split carries last year. With Judkins getting a bulk of those carries, with Mississippi being very run heavy. So I think Ole Miss, they're a team, they play Tulane on the road. They should win that game. If they don't, you really have to question if Lane Kiffin's the guy. They should lose to Alabama. They get LSU the next week. The good news with Ole Miss is they get Alabama and LSU early in the season. So if they were to somehow end the month of September 5-0, this could be Lane Kiffin's year. If they can beat Alabama on September 23rd and LSU on September 30th, Ole Miss is 5-0. And at that point, all Lane Kiffin has to do is not screw up. Because now, to be fair, Ole Miss does get Georgia. They would probably lose that game. But as long as you don't lose to Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, and as long as you don't lose to Georgia, I see at least 4 losses on this. I see at least 3 losses for Mississippi Ole Miss. I have them at 9-3. But yeah, because I have them losing to Alabama, I have them losing to Georgia, and I have them losing to Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, which is always a big rivalry between the 2 teams in the state of Mississippi. So, yeah, I do think Ole Miss beats LSU, but because they lose 3 SEC games and LSU only loses 2, LSU still finishes ahead of Ole Miss despite losing to Ole Miss. So I have Ole Miss at 9-3, Joey. And I do have Mississippi State beating them in the Egg Bowl. You got any impressions on this Ole Miss team? They could be 8-4 if they lose to Tulane on the road, which I'm not discounting. I just don't think it's very likely.
You know, 8 to 10 wins. I don't see that changing. I think having them 9-3 is a good spot. You know, but they're going to have to prove that they can get over that hump because for years they have been right in that mix and not done anything else. So for me, it's prove you can get over that hump because you have been in that one category, that one slot for so long. I don't think you know there's another slot available for you.
Yep. And that's the big thing with Lane Kiffin. He has not gotten over the hurdle in the SEC West. Like, he's a respected coach, but he hasn't been to an SEC title game yet. And the same could be said about the next team we're going to preview, Jimbo Fisher's Texas A&M Aggies. And Connor Weigman's going to be their quarterback. Reuben Owens is going to be the running back. Evan Stewart's going to be the wide receiver. And Damani Richardson's going to take over at safety. And I think Texas A&M had another cornerback last year drafted. So that it really does put Texas A&M in a tough spot. Now, if they were to beat Alabama, they have a very realistic shot of, because Texas A&M's toughest games are versus Alabama, at Tennessee, at Ole Miss, and at LSU to end the year. I think those are all losses, and I think Texas A&M goes 8-4. But if they can beat Alabama, look out. This is a team that just might take off confidence-wise. I think their floor is 8-4, and that's where I'm going to project them. But I think their ceiling could be 11-1 if they put everything together.
Just be honest about it. Even when they've had superstar defensive players that have gone to the NFL,
and offensive players like Mike Evans, because remember they had Mike Evans and Fish and Matthews.
I know about their offensive players, but their defense has always given up like 40, 50 points a game. They suck defensively, no matter what you do. Well, their offense has been one of the most prolific in college football over the last 20 years. So you're looking at it like you got all these great defensive players and you sucked on defense. Well, your defense has given up 70 points and you're scoring 60. Okay, where's the disconnect here? Mike Leach is going to have to do something with that defense for the first time in his life.
Well, Mike Leach is not the coach at Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher is, former Florida State coach that won
Jimbo Fisher, my bad. But the thought process is, I know I'm taking a time machine back and,
basically, I think the point Joey's getting at here is ever since Myles Garrett left, Texas A&M's defense has been dog water. And when I say dog water, I mean another word.
He wasn't great. The defense wasn't even great when he was there. He just covered up a lot of deficiencies. So it's like they're going to have to get their shit together because I don't care how good their offense is. If their defense gives up 10 points more than their offense scores, it ain't going to matter. If they have the offense to win the national title, they have the defense to finish as one of the worst teams in college football. That's got to change at some point.
Yeah. And the final two teams, Alabama and Georgia. Alabama's starting freshman Caden Proctor at left tackle, Seth McLaughlin at center, Tyler Booker, a 2025 first rounder, the right guard. He left guard last year. Latham's the right tackle. Ja'Cory Brooks and Jermaine Burton are back at receiver. Dallas Turner's going to be the edge rusher at 34, left outside linebacker next to with Will Anderson gone. He might play right outside linebacker. We'll see. Kool-Aid McKinstry's our corner. Caleb Downs is the strong safety, and Malachi Moore is moving from nickel corner to free safety, where he will start next to true freshman Caleb Downs. So that is Alabama. Alabama, once again, pretty stacked roster. It's an unknown with their quarterback situation. We don't know if it's looking like Jalen Milroe will start. He started a game when Bryce Young was injured last year, but it's looking like Ty Sims will play the opener for Alabama, who hosts Middle Tennessee State next week. Yeah, go figure. This is why we need to have 9 or 10 SEC conference games rather than the current format where Alabama only has to play 8 games in the SEC and 4 non-conference games, because it's going to be really interesting, because Alabama's non-conference opponents are Middle, Texas, who comes to Tuscaloosa this year, Florida Stadium, and Chattanooga. Yeah. And it's like the tickets for the Alabama games against Middle and Chattanooga are like $6. They're about as cheap as Jaguars tickets were when the Jaguars sucked. So that should say a lot. But, you know, I think Alabama's going to be an interesting team. And since they don't play Georgia in the regular season, I do think there's a very good chance they run the table and go 12-0. If they were playing Tennessee on the road again, like last year, maybe. But I think there's a very good chance Alabama goes 12-0 and wins the SEC West outright.
Yeah, and because that's a thing. It goes to what I mentioned earlier about the Eagles basically saying, don't worry, as long as Georgia's a perennial contender, so will we be. Because the Eagles are drafting all Georgia players. I think that if you really looked at it and a team took to, we're going to draft a bunch of Alabama players, I think the big disconnect, the big difference is, because I think there would be a difference. The Eagles are great. I think that team would probably be a little less great because Alabama does not have the athletes. I think the two teams are very similar, but the athletic capabilities, I think the teams look for different things. With Alabama, they look for the mental game as much as they do the physical game, where Georgia looks for the physical traits and develops the mental traits. So I think they look for different things, but they get the same results on the college level. And I think Alabama's going to be right there, same as they've always been. They're going to be right at the top. And I really do like their offensive line, especially that young left tackle. I really do. I think he's going to be a great left tackle for them, and I think he has projected potential to be a top 5 NFL pick here in a few years.
Yep, in 2026, when he's draft eligible, he should be a top 5 pick. Just like Evan Neal was a projected top 5 pick, he fell to 7. But I do think Caden Proctor is going to be a top 5, top 10 pick in 2026. I'm with you on that. We talked about him last week. So I guess you went back and watched a little bit of this film. I'm impressed.
I actually still do the dirty work when things get a little dicey.
Yeah. You still got it in you.
Completely out of the mix.
You still got that dog in you, Joey. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I can still do it. It's like I was watching some film study on a few players, both pro and college this week, so I can still do it on a whim. I'm not completely out of the mix. But, yeah, the Alabama does have a lot of potential in this. They have a few players, which I like. I like that offensive line. I think they have a few guys in there that could be NFL draft prospects. Proctor, included, who I think could be one of the top prospects when he comes out. I also want you to look at the quarterback. He has some gusto to him. Okay? He has a little bit of that. You don't know how it's going to turn out, but you know he's got something. He comes in there, you're going to see, under Nick Saban, I think you're going to see him blossom. It may not be early, but I think by the end of the year, you're going to see him blossom too.
Yep. And the next team we're going to preview is the Georgia
I think
Bulldogs, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Alabama is, especially offensively, defensively, we know Alabama is going to be as solid as any team in college football. But offensively, I think Alabama could have one of their better offensive seasons in recent memory.
Yep.
That's just my thought on their, overall offensive plan.
Yep. Georgia's the other force in the SEC. Carson Beck's taking over for Stetson Bennett at quarterback. Marcus Roserme-Jackson, Ladd McConkey are back at receiver. Brock Bowers, number 1 tight end in this year's draft, and Oscar Delp could be the number 1 tight end in 2025, are the top 2 tight ends on this roster. Kendall Milton's the running back. Nazir Stackhouse is at nose tackle. And then you have some players in the secondary like Kamari Lassiter and Javon Bullard and Malachi Starks, who should be a 2025 first rounder. I really like Georgia's defense this year. It's been really good the last 2 years. If the 2 inside linebackers, Dumas Johnson and Mondon Jr., step up, then this Georgia team should three-peat as SEC champions. But it really comes down to Georgia and Alabama. It's a tough call because I feel like Alabama has more talent in the front 7, but I feel like Georgia has more talent in the secondary, and they're just more imposing, in my opinion. They're more in your face. They're more, and I think Brock Bowers wants to put together another signature year. I think Brock Bowers could realistically be the first tight end to win the Heisman. That is, I do have him as I have him becoming the first tight end to be a Heisman finalist. I don't know if he'll win.
Brock Bowers is amazing.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers is amazing. We've talked about him several times over the last couple years as being just simply amazing as a talent. And the question is, well, Alabama's a little more rigid in how they do things. Georgia's just like, oh, you're an athlete? You can, whether it be on defense or offense, you can get back in the pass protection, you can play the line, you can play tight end, you can start wide receiver, whatever. They're like, you can do it. We're going to let you showcase that. And so my thought is, because we know this guy's uber talented, Georgia, they had a little drop off a receiver this year because of graduation and prospects. Who's to say they don't say, hey, Bowers, guess what? You can play receiver. Show us what you can do in the slot. Show us what you can do at the H. Who is to say they don't just move Bowers around in that triangle?
I expect a little bit more 12 personnel and 2 tight end sets, because that's what Georgia did last year with Bowers in Washington. And with Oscar Delp projected to be the top tight end in 2025, I think Georgia's going to play a lot more 12 personnel than they did a season ago and really maximize the effectiveness of their tight ends. And I did get a player in the 2024 draft with a first-round grade to add me on Facebook, so we might be able to interview that player later in the season. And spoiler alert, it's Brock Bowers. Yeah.
Yeah, because Brock Bowers is one of those guys that I would love to see play multiple positions, because I think he can do it.
So do I.
He's one that you can throw in the H, play that triangle, and really excel at that. The 12 personnel, I think if Georgia was going to play more 12 personnel, I think they would have done it last year when they had the plethora of tight ends. So I'm not sure if they will do it this year or not, but I think Bowers is a guy that they can really take advantage of. Skill for creating my three for the Heisman. Do I agree that he'll win it? Absolutely not. It's a quarter. But no, even if he comes out as a Gonzalez, he could actually.
Georgia and Alabama, no, but I have Georgia winning due to the because will not face a tight end. And that's
I on that game. The next 3 or 4 years.
He's the best high school recruit. True for the year, assuming another emergency title, and that's the difference. I think that's. I think.
Get drafted.
Kellen was Kyle Pitts 2 years ago.
Well, because it was before him that we were about to 3.
He was drafted 4th. Atlanta.
4th. Yeah. So he could be a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
You could put out more diverse. I not necessarily say he may be I think the play
Kittle. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the really make.
Yeah, I agree with that. A great about teams to Ohio. I 1 Alabama and 12 with the title 1 and 4. I kind of got 4. Michigan and Blake right at quarterback. I've got Brock Bowers and I have Cora in the very have Bowers barely edging up. And then I have high. So that's my prediction. I do Georgia winning in the playoff. Have Michigan champion the Rose CD BS that have happening. And be even more incredible if Texas you young defeated. That's a really bold prediction because that national title bar. So if we meaning Joey's all for it, regardless of who plays in it.
Yeah. You're not a fan of that. So, me not being a fan of any one team,
Joey's got the 3 of the top 4 is me. Joey won. Ohio State's his number. And USC because that would play not identical, if that makes sense. Semi-final.
He's gonna have
an time. Twice in 5, even 22. This would be the 3rd time.
I like doing that because you think I really do. Who's the best? Who's going to most? And from that, and show that the championship.
All right, amazing. We're gonna start our AFC. We got one get the arm, but now everything's working. Broncos. Jerry Jr. did get off. We don't know the severity of it. Look, Denver at 9. He was carted off. I don't know how he's out. So, Denver at 8. Now the Cortland Sutton and should beat the Commanders at home. Again, if Judy also to flip that game to New York. So they get beat at home. They get then they do have
Now,
It does, but calling the Chargers offensive coordinator last year, one of them is calling the bar. He's calling these.
never all but he's afraid to what we need. One of those guys take charge and say
Quarterback. Here's the thing: you're really start out as an optimistic coach or the coach practice. I mean,
what this web with but more important, an incredibly intelligent guy, knew everything he needed football. And coming out of Cal, that could work, but couldn't. You on the